Hey, everybody. Welcome to the morning market briefing. It's Wednesday, March 25th, 2026. Tomorrow's my daughter's birthday, so let me be the first to wish you, Hayden, a happy birthday. I'm sure you are listening in your homeroom class right now. But I feel like I've done all I can do. We just had pastries with parents, and, you know, where I'm from, that counts as a birthday party.
Yeah, the war on
dads,
and really just gendered pastry consumption.
I'm old enough. I mean, I have watched it go from donuts with dad, with Hayden at school, to pastries with parents.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, crowd's not as fun now.
Yeah.
Just throwing it out there.
We had donuts with dudes.
Yeah.
So it could be any dude, I guess, I suppose.
Yeah. David that works here was there, but also David's wife. You know, it's just a different vibe when it's not just the dudes and the kids.
Yeah.
Like there's a newfound sense to sit with your own children rather than like a dad's table and a kid's table.
Yeah.
So you're just squeezed in there. Not easy getting out of an elementary
little chairs.
Lunch table, like the long extended like seats 50 picnic table setup. Not great on the lower back.
No. Also, I would say if you're a man above a certain height, a picnic table style chair is almost impossible to get it out of.
No.
And I've been on the record as admitting that I have a very small torso.
You're all legs.
And it's really tough. Yeah.
It's tough, but we made it. So birthday is complete. Got it done a day early. A week from today, Tom, the Jacob's Ladder event here at the office. Come by at 12:30, free lunch, and come learn about Jacob's Ladder. Check out the jacobsladdergroup.org. Show them some love, show them some support, listen to the podcast. It's still up there. But we got a lot to talk about today. Specifically, we're going to open up talking U.S. and Iran, and we've got a 15-point plan from the U.S. I'll be honest, I was really counting on Ben to be here and take us on a nice, wide-spanning tour of this. But there is some speculation out now that this plan is essentially the same one that was provided to Iran really over the last year. But it does not, no one's confirming that, which I think that, I don't know, given the media slant, I think the media would love to say the U.S. had this plan in front of them, they wouldn't take it, and then they did this, started this senseless war, and they're still not necessarily going to take it. I think they would love to jump on that and say, hey, nothing's changed despite this, but that's kind of where we are. It seems that Iran, according to multiple reports, has decided to allow ships to pass through the strait. But now we're getting a real rally because those reports seemingly are being confirmed. What's your take on reaction?
So it's a little muted. I think the market is taking it as there's clearly some evidence that something is happening.
There's a plan of a plan.
And that whether or not Iran or the people who are running Iran's Twitter are involved is really tough because you've got one aspect, which is that they're saying the U.S. is negotiating with ourselves. Meanwhile, the Witkoff and Jared Kushner, group who has been running negotiations, ran negotiations again with Hamas and in Gaza, and has been basically the peace team that's been deputized by Trump, that's been very successful
elsewhere.
They seem to be the ones who are running the show, and that kind of seems to be who's running this one as well. I actually read a really interesting breakdown this morning. I'm a big analogy guy, but the analogy was essentially we're at the end of the first quarter of a football game, and like in the NFL, when they script plays, we've basically now gotten to the end of the script, which is that, the U.S. came in, they knew exactly how they were going to run their offense to start. We got into the end of the first quarter, and the scripted plays,
all
the
the
US
leaders are dead.
Yeah. So it's like you've achieved the point where you can throw a touchdown at any point. You've got a full air supremacy. All of the backups are in for Iran. They've blown the whistle at the end of the first quarter. And the question is, what does Iran do now? And if you think of how football games go, it's either going to, they could forfeit. They say, hey, we don't have any backups. With the head coach got blown up on day one. But they're, a spirited football team, and they probably aren't going to quit if anything, they're going to rally and start trying to figure out how they can do better in the second quarter. But the problem is sometimes these games start to get chippy, and you often see it in games that are very one-sided. You start seeing players play dirty, and I think that's sort of the question asked is like, why would Iran now agree to anything? The assumption is, one, their options are death, which they don't seem to be worried about. Two, every time we've negotiated them in the past, they basically immediately started working on starting to do their nuclear developing anyway. And they seem to think that they have a lot more traction now with the hearts and minds of the dumbest Gen Z's people on the planet, where they actually, for the first time in world history, seem to be the good guys. And so that, they've got a little bit of street cred, and, hating America has never been more popular in America. And so I think that there's a lot to that they could use as a bargaining chip. I mean, I think there's a certain...
But running the football analogy, my concern, like legitimate concern for the Iranian people would be, you ran a scripted play on offense. It was a look that the defense had not seen before. It was not on film in any other game, and it worked.
Yeah. Now you start rolling out the trick plays.
Now you feel like you've got some momentum. If you go back to that player, you're over-reliant on it. Will it work?
Yeah. It's like you start running trick plays, you start playing dirty, and you start throwing Hail Marys, which almost never work, but can change the points on the scoreboard pretty quickly. And so I think that that's sort of the way to think about it. That being said, the assertion that they're going to not let U.S. and Israel boats go through, which has been picked up in the media, is like, look at them, they've got so much leverage over us. We've done a little bit of research on this, and if you're one of those people who just immediately read the headline and be like, man, they're absolutely got us over a barrel, they're not letting us through, the number of ships that go through the Strait of Hormuz that are either Israeli or U.S. owned, according to many sources, is virtually zero.
Yeah, less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Closer to zero than 1.
Yes, yeah. Basically, it's like a handful a year, if any, sometimes none. And if you look at the flagships that go through there, a lot of them are the Netherlands, the Marshall Islands, countries that benefit from having sort of maritime neutral status. But almost all of those are either China, Japan, or other Middle Eastern countries that are moving oil through the Strait of Hormuz. So really what they're doing is putting pressure on people who previously were economically tied to them and now are completely upstream with no paddle because they can't buy Iranian oil, which is what they want, and they can't move oil from Saudi Arabia or any of these other places through. So the only thing Iran is doing by shutting the Strait of Hormuz is putting political pressure on Trump, but putting massive economic pressure on everyone else, many of whom were previously kind of tight with them.
Yep.
And so the idea that they're like, well, we're not going to let any U.S. ships through. Look at us. We've got so much power. That'd be like, man, I'm not going to, I don't even know. I can't even think of like, I've given up smoking.
Yeah.
It's like, look at me. I'm a hero. I gave up smoking. It's like, I haven't had a cigarette even as a goof in over a decade,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, great job. Like, but it's a lot of patting on the back for something that doesn't actually mean anything. But if you look at the New York Times, you look on Twitter, you look at anybody who's absolutely insufferable in your social media feed, they're seeing this as a real win for the good guys being Iran, because they hate America with a passion that is confusing to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. The two things that I want to call to everybody's attention. The terms of the deal, I would argue, at least as it's been reported in the speculation on it, I will tell you that if Iran agrees to these terms, I would be hard-pressed to look at historical precedent, what has been in place and what is at least being speculated to be in place or up for approval here. I'd be hard-pressed to declare that a real geopolitical win for the United States. When we look at what's available, Tom, you mentioned to the backing out of deals or the skirting of the rules of deals before. That's certainly a factor there. But we're talking about a deal that would offer relief on sanctions for Iran, a rolling back of the nuclear program and it being monitored by the IAEA, which we've talked about before ad nauseum if you go back to last summer with the issues there, missile limits, all of these things that seem like they might be agreed to, but may or may not be followed. I think there's cause for concern that the 15 points of resolution here may or may not actually be all that meaningful long term for the U.S. We did get a question from a super user about the non-hostile vessels, whether they were being charged the toll tax that we discussed yesterday on the call. The reality is I don't really know. They certainly were as of very recently, but I have not seen anything saying that they're not. And I would argue that in the situation in which we declare victory, and part of that is that the Strait of Hormuz is back open to non-hostile vessels, which again is essentially where it was, given that there were not many hostile vessels passing through there. But Iran is now capturing revenue from each passing ship. I would argue that that is not a win for the United States.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, this is definitely not, I've been on the record saying I wasn't on board with this happening. I don't know all of the inner machinations of how close we really were to nuclear apocalypse coming from Iran. I know that they're not great people. And what's interesting this morning is there's been a lot of chatter about, well, why would Iran take a deal? They're dealing with someone who's an unreliable negotiator. Well, guess what? Taste your own cooking, my friend.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing is it's a new approach, which is you look back to the Obama years and it was like, we negotiate in good faith with them. We send them a pallet of American dollars, cash dollars. For some reason, I'm not sure why we did it in cash, but that's what we did. And we negotiated in good faith, and we never threatened to do anything to them. We gave them a bunch of money, and they agreed to not use that money to fund Hamas and Hezbollah. And then they just used that money to do exactly that, and we got exactly nothing. So maybe the move is to be an unreliable negotiator and be like, hey, we really would like a ceasefire. And they're like, well, I don't know. And then you're like, bang, we just blew up another one of your guys. We really like a ceasefire.
I continue to wonder if there's not another major military action to come from the United States. The common thread of everything that Trump has done, whether it was the operation last June, whether it was Venezuela, even the start of this, is that it's not been telegraphed.
Yeah.
I tend to think Trump is, since he ran for office in Republican primaries back in 2015, he has notoriously leaned upon, why would I tell you the plan? So when you think of military conflict, it seems odd that the plan is so clearly broadcasted out.
Yeah.
Especially because it's a plan that does involve U.S. troops. It does involve the United States. I think it would be different if he were talking about Russia and Ukraine and here's what I want to get done, because there's not direct U.S. involvement.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The world's gotten so soft. I think of the advice my dad gave me. He's like, if you ever get in a fist fight, you don't stop until that guy cannot get up. Because if you let him get up, it's still game on.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to be with war fighting. We can't be like, hey, are you good?
Yeah. Let's check on you.
Yeah. Are you okay, man?
Trump did give some commentary yesterday. He was swearing in Mark Wayne Mullen. Still a great name. I feel like that's very under-discussed on our podcast and very much on theme with us. That we've not talked enough about Mark Wayne, one word. But Trump remains optimistic that they're dealing with the right people. He said they're going to make a deal. They did something yesterday that was amazing, actually. They gave us a present, and the present arrived today. It was a very big present worth a tremendous amount of money. I'm not going to tell you what the present is, but it was a very significant prize, and they gave it to us. And they said they were going to give it to us, so that meant one thing to me, that we're dealing with the right people. No, it wasn't nuclear related. It was oil and gas related. It was a very nice thing that they did. So
I have no idea what this could be. My thought would be that
just the opening.
I sort of think it was nuclear related because that would be who would be the right people. It's like, hey, we're going to deliver to you, the uranium, and that's a sign of good faith. But God, I don't know what's going on here.
Who knows? Meanwhile, economically speaking, as it relates to the war, Christine Lagarde, very concerned about inflation.
Yeah, and she should be, but it's another example of them not understanding what actually causes inflation. The central banks continue to not understand. The printing of 67% of all dollars that have ever existed in a short period of time caused the massive inflation we saw in 2022. It was not Putin's price hike. It was not supply chain issues. Those certainly exacerbated it and caused price elevation. But ultimately, when you devalue the dollar like crazy, it causes problems. I mean, I would actually point you, and this is sort of off book, but we did have a little bit of a text back and forth with a super user yesterday about Joe Rogan had Pierre Poilievre on, who is the minority leader in Canada. He's sort of considered Trumpian, though he's very Canadian and very nice. But he's the first person on a major podcast of any kind that I've heard discuss the concept of M2 money supply. He didn't say M2, but he talked about the concept of, it's like he literally uses, it's like we have 10 apples and they're each worth $1 a piece, but then we double the number of dollars, but there's still the same number of apples. So the production of goods has not increased in the United States in a very long time. The production of dollars has increased an insane amount, and that makes there are more dollars to buy the same number of apples, and so the purchasing power of each dollar is lower. Now, we will see that increased oil prices will cause increased prices. That is true, but they will not cause 10% inflation in the short term, because ultimately there are a finite number of dollars that you have in your pocket. And if you spend a lot of them on gas, you are not going to have excess dollars to spend on Nikes, which is actually the reverse of what happened in 2022, which is you had
dollars for everything.
Yeah, you had dollars for everything. They were coming out your ears. They were showing up in your mailbox. And guess what? Nike stock crushed it. And you didn't really worry about gas. And so that's, so when you're not increasing the money supply, there's a finite and non-increasing amount of dollars. There's going to be differences in supply and demand, and there are different elasticities. If you think back to high school economics, price elasticity. So there's going to be obviously an increase in the price of things, but it's not going to be exponential because the demand for things will fall, and then you'll have to see prices cut. I mean, look at Doritos, all these different things that have had their prices cut. Guess what? Demand has dropped like crazy because we're no longer allowing them to be bought by the government with SNAP benefits. Printed dollars going into a company to buy stuff causes the prices to rise. When you take printed dollars off the table to buy things, they have to cut the price. And that's maybe the clearest example I can come up with of the M2 money supply issue. But now Christine Lagarde's like, well, we really need to be careful about what we're going to do with rates because oil prices are going to cause massive inflation. And since everybody knows the playbook, they're just going to ramp prices up. But that's not actually how it works, and I don't think that that's necessarily true. That being said, there will be an enormous amount of upward price pressure that will be, in my opinion, transitory, subject to the length of time that the Strait of Hormuz is closed.
And oil right now trading, for what it's worth, I just pulled it up. Right now we're at about $88. That's obviously elevated. I would just point the average listener to this that this is essentially a range that we saw at different periods, both in 2023 and in 2024.
Yep.
So this is not an unprecedented level of oil. For oil, we're going to be okay, especially if this thing wraps down quickly. I think if this were to wrap down quickly, expect prolonged inflationary fears tied to the price of oil, even though those may not be very valid.
Yeah, Jim Cramer tweeted this morning, and I think he was right, that the media and the oil traders want oil prices to go up. That they're actively rooting for it, which is the playbook we saw in 2008, 2009. It's what we see. We saw it in 2020 when oil went to zero. If you know which way a commodity is going directionally,
you want it to go further that way.
Yeah, people can just dogpile on there, and it will continue to go that direction. And I think that the media loves that this is putting pressure on Trump. Whether or not he's winning or not, it's a victory for them because they can just write all day long about how oil prices are up. And if people walking around the street think, man, oil prices are up, they're going to go buy more gas, and that demand will go up. It's the same principle.
And we've got data from the American Petroleum Institute came out earlier. The numbers in terms of the inventories, and if you want to think of inventories as shorter-term reserves, what's available right now, were significantly higher. The expectation was that crude oil inventories would be down 1.3 million barrels. It was up 2.3. Gasoline expected to be down 2.4 million. It was up 500,000. Distillates expected to be down 1.6 million, up 1.4 million. We'll get official numbers from the Department of Energy later today, but we're actually building stockpiles here. And so the anticipated pressure, the anticipated squeeze is not what they want you to think it is. It's not what's feared. And that's a good thing. I would certainly hope that things are not as bad as reported.
Yeah, if you read the newspaper, you have perception. The perception is that Iran has us over a barrel of the Strait at Hormuz. The perception is that oil prices are going to be skyrocketing and never ending, even though they're actually down and in a pretty normal range right now. The perception is that inflation is going to run out of control because of supply chain shocks or that we aren't going to get enough oil. The fact of the matter is we don't put ships through Hormuz. We don't get our oil from Iran. We have plenty of oil here. In fact, we produce a ton of it. The refining is maybe an issue, but that, is a totally different story unrelated to the war. And oil prices are actually down quite a bit from where they were last week. But there's perception, there's reality. So we need to be really hyper-focused on the data. We actually have more oil reserves than we thought.
Yep.
By a wide margin. That's actually good for us and would necessitate lower oil prices based. But the problem is perception, the vibes, the momentum is all oil, let's go to the moon, and we stink at war. But in reality, we're up, 4 touchdowns at the end of the first quarter. They've scored 3 points, and half their defense is
dead.
Yeah, taking a celestial dirt nap. So, and guess what? We might start running the ball.
Yeah.
The Marines are on the
ground and pound.
Yeah, and we've got Derrick Henry, and they don't.
That's confirmed. We had a rough 2-year Treasury auction yesterday, Tom.
Yeah, I think part of me, it's again perception. The perception is that there will be no rate cuts, and then in fact we might get rate hikes. I don't think that's true. I think we're actually in a transitory upward price pressure scenario. That being said, the 2-year Treasury on Monday hit 4%, and then it came down a little bit. They tried to issue some a little bit lower, and people were like, well, it was 4% yesterday, and things are volatile. So there wasn't a ton of demand there. And I think that's just a function of, if you can be like, hey, man, I'll give you this. I'll sell you a baseball card for $10 today, and the next day I'm like, hey, what about $15? You'd be like,
I don't know, man, it was 10.
I'll do 12.
Yeah.
And that's basically what we had with the 4-year auction. But since then, we've gotten this positive news, and the market is taking it half-heartedly, and we've seen the 2-year fall, and we've also seen rates fall significantly. The 10-year topped 240 yesterday, and it's sitting at like a 440, and it's sitting at like a 432, 431 this morning, which is a big move round trip at a day, and we're talking about almost 20 basis points all the way around. And so things are volatile, but the bond market, I think, is suspect. It thinks that inflation might be higher for a longer period of time, which it may be, but I think that when we get to the backside of that, we're going to see a real drop-off because, we got housing data.
Yeah.
And the housing market continues to be
close with that.
Garbage.
Yeah, I'm going to close with this. KB Homes reported they're down about 4%, had a pretty sizable earnings miss. But these are the numbers that I think you need to be extrapolating because we've talked so much and criticized every piece of inflation data that includes a housing component, especially CPI, which includes owner's equivalence rent as a very sizable portion of the calculation. KB Homes, one of the largest home builders in the country, revenue down 23%. Homes delivered down 14%. Average sales price down 10%. Margin came in at 3.1%. We are typically looking for margin numbers in the mid-20s. This is a massive miss. I'm actually shocked that the stock is only down 4%. But what stands out to me most, Tom, is homes delivered down 14%, even with an average sales price down 10%. If the average sales price is down 10%, that is an economic data point. But the second derivative of that thinking is that if the average sales price was down 10% and homes delivered was down 14%, the average sales price actually needs to be lower.
Yes. So, and then like operating margin at 3.1%, imagine if I told you you could spend 4 months building a house, it's going to cost $300,000, but you're going to profit $9,000.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that seem like a tremendous waste of time and money?
Yeah. That's such a grind. So much can go wrong.
That's a razor thin margin on that much money and that much output. So if the average sales price is down, call it more than 10%, and we look at inflation and the biggest component is housing, and housing is still running at roughly 4% year over year, that number is wrong and could very much offset any impact of oil.
Yes.
I would argue
housing is a larger component of CPI than oil is, and it's a larger component of your day-to-day budget than oil is.
And it's not a component of core PCE,
right?
Which is X food, X energy, because of its volatility. And so I mean, I think that, even our internal tracker has inflation going from 1.3 to 1.9, which is still almost a full percent lower than any CPI print because the housing component is so high and also so incorrect. And so, sure, we could rise back up to 2.5% from our 1.9 on the tracker because oil prices remain elevated. But we went from 1.3, which was way below the Fed's target.
We're moving up to 2.5, not up to 4.
Yeah, which I would still argue if we're at 2.5, then the federal funds rate should be somewhere around 3, which is 2 cuts, which is what we started with as the expectation for this year. And I still maintain that the length of this war in Iran, which may be wrapping up, there's some sniff of a possibility that could happen very shortly, could bring that down very quickly. And so I think that even if there is a ceasefire for 30 days, what are we going to see? We're going to see the largest restocking of energy in the history of the world, probably, because if it goes south, people are going to get ahead of that. So we might see oil prices rocket, but then everyone will be supplied up. And so if it kicks back off, the effect will actually probably be lower oil prices. Yeah. So there's so many different things that could happen, and I wouldn't claim to know which ones are going to happen, but you have to think about it. I say it all the time, probabilistically. There's a 30% chance that this could happen, 50% chance something else could happen, and then you've got the fat tails of all the 10 things that are in the smaller potential outcomes, and you have to be like, all right, well, if I can
price these things,
if I think they could run or pass, that's how I'm going to run my defense. There's a very small possibility on third down they're going to punt, and so I'm not going to put a guy on the 5-yard line to receive a punt.
Yeah.
But if you look at the news, they're like, man, we're about to punt 4 times in a row, and it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Look at the data. So that's maybe too much football analogy for today.
No, there's never enough. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Please subscribe to the podcast. Give us a like. Watch our videos. Please share it. We're trying to grow the audience. We have, 152 subscribers now?
153. We've been
153. Nice little climb. We're trying to get to 1 million by the end of the month. So we've got 5 or 6 days.
If each of you could add, call it 80,000 friends.
Yeah, that'd be huge.
And family.
Do it for the boys. Hope you guys have a great day. We will be back tomorrow day. Talk to you soon.